Look, the M2 MacBook Air has better features and it's more powerful than the M1 model, other than the SSD issues that I'm going to talk about later. And by the way, I'm probably going to have a different opinion on that than you might expect. So if you're just looking for the more powerful machine, that's the M2 model. But the question should be, is it a better buy for people who are looking for the best value? And for that, we need to take a closer look. And full disclosure, I paid for all of these laptops with my own money. And it's important that we first think about who these laptops were designed for, meaning who's the target audience? The MacBook Air is the lowest tier laptop that Apple makes. It's intended to be an entry-level laptop targeted at an everyday user who wants a laptop from Apple. I bring this up because as we talk about features and benefits, I want you to keep that in mind. And we'll talk about this more in my configuration recommendation section later on, but the base M2 MacBook Air starts at $1,200 and the base M1 starts at $1,000. All right, so let's start with the design, where this year we saw a major overhaul. And the M1 model has a wedge design to it, where the laptop gradually gets thicker from front to back. The M2 model is much more squared off and has the same thickness all the way around, similar to what we have on the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro, but of course it's a lot thinner. Practically speaking, this makes the M2 Air feel slimmer than the M1 model because I always grab the M1 model by the thicker part, which is less slippery. But realistically, both of these are super portable, and while the M2 model is 0.1 pounds or 50 grams lighter, that doesn't really translate into a meaningful difference. Both laptops are available in silver and space gray. The M1 model is also offered in gold, then the M2 model comes with midnight and starlight. Now, I love this midnight color. It's like a really cool dark blue, but it will get a ton of fingerprints on it. Like literally every time you pick it up, you open it, you close it, whatever you're gonna do, you're going to see fingerprints. So if that's something that's going to bother you, I would go with one of the other colors. But if it won't bother you, this color is awesome. As far as ports go, some things have changed and some stayed the same. We're still getting 2 Thunderbolt ports on the M2 model, and just like with the M1, both are located on the left. Now, this unfortunately means that you can still only connect accessories and charge the M2 MacBook Air from the left side, just like with the previous model. However, we are getting an upgrade here because the M2 model includes a MagSafe 3 port, so you can now quickly and safely charge your MacBook Air without having to occupy one of the Thunderbolt ports. Something else that was a bit disappointed is that the ports on the M2 MacBook Air are still Thunderbolt 3 ports, so we still only have native support for one external monitor. Now, I did mention in the beginning that this is an entry-level laptop, but so many more users are now either working from home or from office environments where they have multiple monitors. And I'm not talking about photo or video editors. I'm just talking about basic users who are doing office work. And again, even for them, having additional monitors can really help with productivity. Now, I took this to the next level with my main workstation, which has 7 monitors connected to it. And this allows me to do things like have Photoshop, Illustrator, Dreamweaver, a reference document, and then multiple testing browsers open at the same time. And even now when I do research for a video, I can have multiple sources open at the same time, and I don't have to minimize and maximize windows all day long. Now, I completely understand that that's an extreme example, but I do think that because of how powerful these MacBooks are, a lot of users would benefit from the option of having multiple external displays. Now, the next update that we got with the M2 MacBook Air is that now the 3.5mm headphone jack has support for high impedance headphones. I'm not sure how many users this will matter to, but if that's something that you're looking for, you got it. One of the biggest upgrades that we got with the M2 model is the display. First, we're moving from a 13.3-inch Retina display on the M1 MacBook Air to a 13.6-inch Liquid Retina display on the M2. We're getting a slightly higher resolution, a brighter display with 500 nits peak brightness versus 400 on the M1, and both laptops have a P3 display, which is a wider color gamut for better color reproductions, and both offer True Tone. This means that there are sensors that can detect the color temperature of the ambient light in the room, and then adjust the displays so that white always appears as white, rather than yellow or blue. The one other advantage of the newer display on the M2 MacBook Air is that it now supports over 1 billion colors versus 16.7 million on the M1 model. Now, exactly how much these upgrades with the display will matter to you depends on what you're going to be doing. If you're just working with spreadsheets and Word documents all day, it's not really going to be significant. But if you're doing the type of work where color accuracy really matters, then it's a much more meaningful difference. Having said that, the M2 MacBook Air display is a nicer looking display. It's bigger and it's brighter, so it's a better option if you're going to be working outside or in areas where you might have to deal with reflections. As far as the typing experience, both of these laptops have amazing keyboards, and they're as good as any keyboard that I've used on any laptop. The one thing that I like about the M1 model is that because of the wedge design, the front of the laptop is super low, so it's really comfortable to type on. With some of the thicker MacBook Pro models, the front edge is higher up and then it digs into my wrist. And the M2 MacBook Air, even though it has the same design as the larger MacBook Pro, it's so much thinner that the edge is not really an issue. The one upgrade that we did get with the M2 MacBook Air keyboard is that now we have a full height row of function keys at the top and we have a larger Touch ID button. There isn't any change to the functionality, but the larger keys are more comfortable to use. The trackpad on the M2 MacBook Air was also made a little bigger, and in general, the trackpads on MacBooks are probably my favorite on any laptop that I've ever used. Now, the camera on the M2 MacBook Air was also upgraded to a higher resolution of 1080p versus 720p on the M1 MacBook Air. We're also getting a newer image signal processor on the M2 chip, and we have better low light performance, so here's a quick sample. Here's a camera and microphone test of the M1 MacBook Air and the M2 MacBook Air. This should give you a pretty good idea of the type of image quality that you're going to get and the type of audio quality that you should expect. Now, if you take a quick look at the MacBook Air body, you'll notice that there are no longer speaker grills to the right and left of the keyboard. Apple upgraded the M2 MacBook Air to a 4-speaker system, and you'll find them on the back of the keyboard right under the display. In terms of sound quality, I wasn't really sure how this was going to pan out, but there's a noticeable upgrade from the M1 models. The speakers are louder, the mids and highs are a little bit brighter, and then overall, the audio has more presence, it's fuller, and it has less of that tinny quality to it. I would also add that in general, audio quality in a laptop is one of Apple's real strengths. I think it's fair to say that a lot of the target audience for these laptops isn't really gonna care too much about benchmarks, but there are some interesting things to look at when we compare these two chips. Most of them are in favor of the M2, but not all. As far as CPU performance goes, the M2 has more powerful high performance cores and more efficient high efficiency cores. So as you would expect, it outperforms the M1 for both short-term single and multi-core performance. When we look at GPU performance, once again, we can see the M2 MacBook Air with more GPU cores outpacing the M1. Remember that neither of these have an active cooling system or a fan. So when we go back and look at sustained CPU performance with Cinebench, we see that the M1 shows about an 11% drop in performance when comparing a 10-minute test to a 30-minute test. And the M2 shows about a 9% drop. I think context is really important here. So I want to point out that this is a test that pushes these laptops to 100% CPU capacity for 30 minutes straight. And that's not something that I expect the vast majority of MacBook Airs to ever do. Of course, if sustained performance is a requirement for you, then one of the MacBook Pro models is probably a better option. Another topic that has gotten a lot of attention is SSD performance. And you can see that the M1 with 256 gigabytes actually has faster read and write speeds than the M2 with 256 gigabytes. And that's because Apple is using a single 256 gigabyte chip with the M2 versus 228 gigabyte chips on the M1. Now, once you start moving up in storage size, and you can see that the M2 moves ahead, and I also included a 512 gigabyte M2 for my MacBook Pro just for reference. Now, do I think that this difference in speed is going to make a meaningful difference for the target audience for these laptops? Probably not. And at the same time, I think that Apple should have been more transparent here and included this information on the M2 MacBook Air checkout page. Even though I don't think that it would make a noticeable difference for most users, it's important for Apple to disclose this, especially when the speeds are essentially doubled as you move up in storage size. Now, one benefit that has stayed consistent is battery life, and both of these models are rated for 18 hours of video playback and 15 hours of wireless web browsing. The M2 Air has a 52.6 watt hour battery versus 49.9 watt hour on the M1 Air, and both of these easily get me through a full day of use. And this is something that I've been super impressed with from Apple. The battery life on this entire lineup of SoC laptops has been absolutely fantastic. Now let's get to the different configuration and pricing options, because I think that's going to help you pick the right options for you. And I'm going to use the pricing and availability from the Apple Store, but you can usually find better prices by using the links in the description. The base models of both laptops come with an 8-core CPU, 8 GB of unified memory or RAM, and 256 GB of internal storage. The M2 model comes with an 8-core GPU, and right now Apple only sells the 7-core GPU version of the M1 MacBook Air unless you find a refurbished one on their website. Now, realistically, for the target audience for the MacBook Air, the extra GPU core isn't really going to make a noticeable difference. And as a quick reminder about pricing, we're looking at $1,200 for the M2 and $1,000 for the M1. With the M2 chip, you can actually upgrade to a 10-core GPU for an additional $100 if that's something that your specific workflow would benefit from. When we look at unified memory, the M1 can be upgraded to 16 GB and the M2 can be upgraded all the way up to 24 GB. A more unified memory will let you run more apps at the same time, and it will allow you to have a ton of open tabs in your browser, all without your computer having to slow down or to start using swap memory. I think upgrading to 16 GB is a great option, and at the same time, I really wish that Apple wouldn't charge $200 for each additional 8 GB of RAM, but remember that none of these laptops can be upgraded after you buy them, and they should last you for a very long time, so make sure that you get what you need. Another upgrade to consider is internal storage. 256 GB is a bit on the low end, so keep in mind how much space you need for the apps that you run. You can always use an external SSD or cloud storage for files, but still consider what you need to store locally on your laptop, and then make sure that you have enough storage now and for the life of the device. In both cases, these laptops can be upgraded all the way up to 2 TB. So here's how I would look at this decision. The M2 MacBook Air has a new design, a more powerful processor, a bigger and better display, a better camera system, better speakers, you have MagSafe for faster charging, and you can upgrade the unified memory all the way up to 24 GB. I think that some of the upgrades that were made to the M2 MacBook Air are things that are really nice to have. I don't see the improved processing power being a real selling point for the vast majority of the target audience, but if the display, the camera, and speakers are your top priorities, go ahead and pick one up. Personally, I think that a combination of 256 GB of storage and 8 GB of RAM is a bit low for a laptop that will last me at least 5 years in terms of processing power. So if I had $1,200 to spend on one of these, I would buy the M1 MacBook Air and I would upgrade to 16 GB of RAM. I would also consider getting a refurbished M1 MacBook Air, saving some money, and then also upgrading the internal storage. Now you should see how the M2 MacBook Air compares with the M2 MacBook Pro. Click on my face to subscribe. Hopefully this video was helpful. You know what I always say, buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon.